The drop from faster-than-light travel feels like a physical blow. It hits your chest first, then it rattles your bones. The hull of the ship groans in the vacuum. Metal screams against the dark. Commander Marsh gripped the edge of the tactical console. Her knuckles were stark white. Red alarms pulsed in the dim light of the bridge. They were in deep space, 400 light-years behind enemy lines. This was Krath territory, the absolute heart of the interstellar war. Nobody had been this deep in 60 years. Nobody human. Nobody from the Allied conclave. The navigation officer wiped sweat from his forehead. He confirmed their coordinates twice. They were exactly where they needed to be. But something was wrong. The tactical display did not show empty space. It showed a massive shadow, a jagged silhouette floating dead ahead. It was not a Krath patrol ship. It was too big. It was entirely too quiet. Marsh leaned closer to the screen. She ordered a full directional scan. The sensor array pushed through the static of cosmic radiation. The results came back in agonizingly slow seconds. No power signature, no heat emissions, no active life support. It was an abandoned ship, a colossal derelict drifting in the void, and it was older than anything in the human database. The design was completely wrong. It had no thruster banks, no visible weapon pods, just strange organic curves frozen in the ice of deep space. "Is it Krath?" the tactical officer asked. His voice was tight with tension. "No," Marsh said quietly. "This was an unknown, a wild card." In the middle of the most important deep space mission in galactic history, they had just stumbled into a ghost. The Conclave had sent them here to cripple the Krath supply lines, to end a war that had been bleeding the galaxy dry for 6 decades. They were just one ship, the Bastard's Bargain. A heavy and ugly siege engine built for disruption. They were not explorers. They were saboteurs. But space does not care about your plans. "Commander, I'm picking up a signal," the communications officer said. The bridge went completely silent. A signal meant power. Power meant they were not alone in the dark. "Put it on speakers," Marsh ordered. A burst of static filled the room. Then a rhythmic clicking. It sounded like mechanical breathing. Slow and deliberate. Then came a voice, or something trying desperately to be a voice. It spoke in a frequency that matched old Earth radio waves. But humanity had never been here. Never in all of recorded history. This was a first contact scenario happening in the worst possible place. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. Would you run, or would you try to answer the call? Marsh did not have time to decide. The main console flashed yellow. "The signal is not just audio," the tech officer shouted. "It is trying to access our mainframe, an AI anomaly. The derelict was dead, but its ghost was trying to hack them." The automated defense protocols of the ship engaged immediately. Code clashed in the dark network of the ship. The lights on the bridge flickered. "Shut down the external receivers," Marsh barked. "I am trying," the officer replied. "It is bypassing the firewall." The Bastard's Bargain shuddered. The derelict was pulling them in digitally. The screens turned a blinding white. The hum of the engine changed pitch. For 19 years, Marsh had commanded this vessel. She knew every sound it made. This sound was terrifyingly wrong. It was the sound of a machine losing its mind. "Cut the main power feed," she commanded. "Do it manually right now." The engineering chief slammed his hand onto the physical override lever. The bridge plunged into absolute darkness. Emergency lights flickered on a moment later. They were bathed in a dull red glow. The hack had stopped. But the silence that followed was infinitely heavier than before. They were sitting blind in enemy space. If a Krath patrol passed by right now, they would be nothing more than target practice. "Get the passive sensors back online," Marsh whispered. Nobody spoke above a whisper. The dark of space felt like it was physically pressing against the hull. The tactical screen blinked back to life. The derelict was still there, but the signal was completely gone. In its place, a single line of text flashed on the main display. It was written in flawless human English. It said, "Do not let them hear you." The Bastard's Bargain was not a new ship. It was old. It was heavy. It was covered in thick repair patches and unidentifiable technology. 847 people lived on this ship. They were a family forged in the fires of a losing war. They worked in tight corridors. They smelled the same recycled air every single day. They trusted Marsh with their lives. She could feel the crushing weight of those lives right now. The text on the screen blinked again. Do not let them hear you. Who was them? The Krath? Or something much older and much worse? The Krath were methodical monsters. They moved like an unstoppable glacier. They destroyed everything in their path. They had slowly consumed 43% of the known galaxy. But this derelict felt like it was running from something entirely different. Marsh wiped her hands on her uniform. She had to stay focused. The mission was the only thing that mattered. The disruption of the Krath logistics, the survival of the Conclave, the 11 allied species waiting for a miracle back home. We ignore the ghost, she finally said. Her voice broke the tension. Power up the stealth drives. We are moving around it. The helmsman nodded quickly. He typed in the complex commands. The massive engines of the Bastard's Bargain flared silently in the vacuum. They began to drift around the ancient alien vessel. The true scale of the derelict became apparent as they passed it. It was easily the size of a small moon. Deep gashes scarred its surface, weapon burns that defied all known logic. Whatever had attacked this ship possessed firepower that made the Krath look like children playing with matches. Marsh kept her eyes locked on the tactical feed. She did not like leaving a dark mystery behind. But curiosity got people killed in deep space. You have to learn to walk away from the unknown. You have to learn to prioritize. The survival of the mission always came first. They cleared the massive shadow of the derelict. The familiar stars returned to the view screen, but the tension on the bridge did not fade away. The AI anomaly had left a permanent stain on their systems, a tiny fragment of code that the engineers could not isolate or delete. It sat in the background of their mainframe, watching them, waiting for its moment. The passive sensors flared to life again. The helmsman froze in his seat. A new contact was entering the sector. It was not a ghost this time. It was a Krath patrol. 3 heavy cruisers moving in a standard search pattern. They were sweeping the area with active radar. The Krath never rushed. They moved with a terrifying and calculated patience. They had been fighting the Conclave for 60 years. They had never once retreated. Not a single step back in 6 decades of total war. They just pressed forward until their enemies broke. Marsh watched the red dots on the tactical screen. They were huge. Any one of those cruisers could vaporize the Bastard's Bargain in a straight fight. But they were not here for a straight fight. They were here to break the rules. Hold steady, Marsh ordered. Keep the stealth baffles at maximum. The engineering deck confirmed the order. The ship went into a state of deep hibernation. They turned off the life support heaters. The temperature on the bridge plummeted instantly. Crew members watched their own breath turn into white mist in the freezing air. The history of the war played in Marsh's mind. She remembered the Conclave Hall, the great meeting of 11 alien species, the despair in the room as the Velhari pacifists admitted they had lost all their ships, the grim numbers read out by the Senti generals. And then humanity had stood up. They had offered just one ship. The alien ambassadors had been insulted. They thought it was a joke. How could one human ship do what thousands of allied fleets could not? But humanity had a different plan. They did not want to fight the Krath. They wanted to paralyze them. The Krath cruisers drifted closer. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Smooth, dark metal absorbing the starlight. They moved in perfect unison. A hive mind of military efficiency. If they pinged the Bastard's Bargain now, the war would be over. The last hope of the galaxy would burn in the cold dark. Then, the AI anomaly woke up. The fragment of alien code from the derelict pulsed in the mainframe. It bypassed the lockdown. It began to hum. A low-frequency vibration shook the deck plating. It was trying to broadcast a signal. It was trying to scream. If you enjoy stories like this, drop a like. It really helps keep these transmissions coming. And it tells the algorithm to spread the signal further. Marsh lunged at the communications console. She bypassed the digital controls entirely. She ripped open the maintenance panel under the desk. She grabbed a heavy wrench. She smashed it down on the physical transmission relay. Sparks showered the freezing bridge. The humming stopped instantly. The signal died before it could leave the ship. She breathed heavily. Her hand was shaking. The tactical officer stared at her in shock. She had just physically destroyed their primary comms relay. But they were alive. The Krath cruisers glided past their position. They did not slow down. They had not heard the anomaly, but the Krath did not ignore the area completely. They adjusted their course. They moved directly toward the ancient derelict. Marsh watched the screen closely. She expected the Krath to scan the dead ship, to catalog it, to ignore it like they ignored everything that was not a threat. Instead, the Krath cruisers opened fire, without warning, without scanning. They unleashed a torrent of plasma fire that lit up the void. The silent derelict was torn to pieces. Millennia of unknown history evaporated in a blinding flash of light. The Krath did not stop until there was nothing left but dust. "Why did they do that?" the tactical officer whispered. "They did not even check for salvage, because they are afraid of it," Marsh realized. The Krath were biological machines. They feared nothing in the conclave, but they feared whatever had built that derelict. They feared the ancient ghosts of this galaxy. And that meant the Krath had a weakness. They could feel fear. The patrol moved on. And they left the dust cloud behind and disappeared into the deep space vacuum. The bastard's bargain was safe for now, but they were deeply damaged. The communications relay was smashed, the stealth drives were overheating, and they were still hundreds of light years from their target. "We need cover," Marsh said. "We cannot make the final jump in open space. Our heat signature is too high. If we jump now, every Krath sensor on the eastern flank will see us coming." The helmsman scanned the local sector. "There are no asteroid fields," he reported. "No nebulae. Just empty space. And one gravity well." He pointed to a faint reading on the edge of the screen. It was an unknown planet, a rogue planet. It had no star to orbit. It just drifted alone in the absolute darkness of deep space. It was a frozen ball of rock and ice, uncharted, unnamed, completely dead. "Take us there," Marsh ordered. "We dive into its atmosphere. We will use its magnetic field to mask our heat signature while we repair the drives." It was a massive risk. Rogue planets were notoriously unstable. Their gravity was erratic. Their atmospheres were toxic storms of frozen methane and razor-sharp ice. Flying into one was like flying into a blender, but staying in open space was certain death. The helmsman locked in the coordinates. The bastard's bargain turned its heavy nose toward the absolute dark. They were going to hide in the underworld of the galaxy. The descent was brutal. The bastard's bargain was not built for atmospheric entry. It was built for the vacuum. As they hit the upper atmosphere of the rogue planet, the entire ship screamed. The thick layers of frozen methane tore at the hull plating. Gravity grabbed them violently. The artificial stabilizers failed. The crew was thrown against their harnesses. Red emergency lights bathed the bridge in a bloody glow. Marsh gripped her console so hard her fingers went numb. The view screen showed nothing but violent, swirling black clouds. "Temperature outside is dropping past -200. The engineering chief yelled over the roar of the hull. "The heat shields are cracking. We cannot sustain this pressure." "Take us deeper," Marsh shouted back. "The Krath sensors can still penetrate the upper layers. We need to reach the surface. We need the magnetic interference of the crust." They plummeted like a stone. The noise was deafening. It sounded like the ship was being crushed in a giant fist. Then, abruptly, the turbulence stopped. They broke through the lower cloud layer. The heavy thrusters fired, arresting their fall. They hovered in the pitch-black sky of the unknown planet. "Turn on the floodlights," Marsh ordered. 4 massive beams of light pierced the darkness. They illuminated a landscape of jagged black ice and towering frozen spires. It looked like the surface of a nightmare. There was no wind down here, just a crushing, heavy silence. They found a deep canyon and nestled the massive warship inside it. The ice walls completely masked their thermal and electronic signature. "We are hidden," the helmsman whispered. He sounded like he did not believe it. "Damage report," Marsh demanded. She unbuckled her harness and stood up. Her legs were shaking slightly, but her voice was pure steel. The engineering chief ran the diagnostics. "Hull integrity is at 70%. We lost the primary comms relay, but we already knew that. The stealth drives need at least 4 hours to cool down and recalibrate, but the disruption array is intact. The weapon is ready." That was all that mattered. The disruption array. It was an ugly piece of experimental technology bolted to the underside of the ship. It was not designed to blow up Krath ships. It was designed to break their communication, to blind them. "We have 4 hours," Marsh said. "Get the repair crews in suits. I want those drives fixed, and keep the passive scanners running. I want to know if a rock falls on this planet." The bridge crew settled into a tense rhythm. Outside, the engineers crawled across the frozen hull. They worked in absolute silence, communicating only through suit tethers. The cold was so intense it threatened to freeze their suits solid. But they worked fast. They knew the stakes. Inside the ship, Marsh poured herself a cup of cold synthetic coffee. She stared at the tactical map. The Krath supply lines were vast. They fed thousands of ships on the front lines. The Conclave had tried to attack those lines for decades, but the Krath always swarmed the attackers. Humanity had realized a simple truth. You do not win by attacking the armored convoy. You win by destroying the road. The bastard's bargain was going to broadcast a virus so powerful it would corrupt the biological navigation systems of the Krath supply ships. It would cause a logistical stroke. "Sir," the tech officer called out. His voice broke the silence. "I'm getting a reading on the passive scanner. It is coming from beneath the ice." Marsh put her coffee down. "What kind of reading? Geothermal?" "No," he said. Nor he swallowed hard. "Biological." The bridge went dead quiet again. Biological readings on a dead rogue planet without a star? It was impossible. Nothing could live in this cold. Nothing could survive without an energy source. "Give me a visual," she ordered. The tech officer adjusted the floodlights. He aimed them straight down into the transparent black ice of the canyon floor. The light penetrated deep into the frozen crust. It was not rock down there. It was machinery. Massive biological machinery. Pulsing slowly. Veins the size of city blocks carrying thick glowing fluids. The entire crust of the planet was alive. They had not just found a hiding spot. They had landed right on top of a massive Krath logistics hub. This rogue planet was a mobile storage facility. A dark site, hidden in plain sight in the deep void. "We are sitting on the bomb," the tactical officer whispered. "If they know we are here, they will swarm us from the inside out, but they do not know we are here," Marsh said. Her eyes narrowed. A cold smile touched her lips. "We were looking for a single supply artery to cut. We just found the beating heart. We are not going to run. We are going to break it." The realization hit the crew like a physical weight. They were parked on top of a sleeping giant. The ice beneath them was a thin shell covering thousands of dormant Krath biological machines. If they woke up, the bastard's bargain would be torn apart in seconds, but the opportunity was too massive to ignore. If they fired the disruption array from here, the signal would not just hit the passing supply ships, it would echo through the entire biological network of this facility. It would poison the Krath logistics from the root. "Recall the repair crews," Marsh ordered. "Tell them to drop their tools and get inside immediately. We are firing the array early." The engineers scrambled back to the airlocks. They left their welding torches freezing on the hull. The panic was controlled, but it was real. Every second spent on the surface felt like standing on a landmine. "Power up the disruption array," Marsh commanded. "Reroute all auxiliary power to the transmitters. I want a continuous broadcast on all Krath internal frequencies." The engineering chief hesitated. "Sir, if we fire the array while sitting on the ice, the feedback loop could melt the crust. We will sink into the facility. We have to be airborne." "Then get us airborne," she snapped. The heavy engines roared to life. The sudden heat blasted the canyon walls. The ice instantly flashed into steam. The entire canyon began to collapse. Huge chunks of black ice the size of buildings rained down on the bastard's bargain. The ship shook violently as it forced its way up through the falling debris. "Fire the array now," Marsh yelled. The tech officer slammed the execution switch. The disruption array unleashed its payload. It was not a laser. It was not a missile. It was a silent, invisible wave of highly complex data. It pierced the ice and drove straight into the biological network of the Krath facility. The effect was instantaneous. The glowing veins beneath the ice turned a sickly purple. The slow, rhythmic pulsing turned into a chaotic spasm. The biological machines began to reject their own programming. They were turning on each other. The rogue planet began to scream. It was a low, terrifying vibration that shook the bones of the human crew. The ice cracked open. Massive mechanical tendrils burst through the surface, thrashing blindly in the dark sky. They were trying to find the source of their pain. "Get us into orbit," Marsh ordered. "Push the engines to maximum." The bastard's bargain clawed its way out of the gravity well. The thrusters burned white-hot. A massive tendril whipped through the steam, barely missing the port-side hull. It smashed into a canyon wall, bringing down an avalanche of ice. They broke through the cloud layer. The stars returned. They were out of the atmosphere, but the job was not done. The disruption signal was now broadcasting across the entire sector. What is your favorite space sci-fi trope? Tell me in the comments down below. Is it the desperate escape? Or the brilliant tactical strike? Because this crew was doing both. The tech officer monitored the galactic frequencies. "Commander, it is working. The Krath supply arteries are failing. We are seeing massive logistical pileups across 3 different star systems. Convoys are stopping dead in space. The network was collapsing. The disruption array was causing a cascading failure. The Krath relied on perfect certainty. They relied on their schedules and their biological perfection. When that perfection was poisoned, they had no backup plan. They had no idea how to improvise." "We are picking up frantic transmissions from the Krath eastern flank," the communications officer said. "The frontline divisions have lost contact with high command. They are issuing contradictory orders. They are confused. Confused." That was a word that had never been applied to the Krath in 60 years of war. They did not do confusion. They did not do hesitation. But now their entire eastern offensive was grinding to a halt. "Keep the signal running," Marsh said. "Let them feel it. Let them realize that their perfect machine is broken." But the victory was short-lived. The AI anomaly in their mainframe woke up again. The fragment of code from the ancient derelict. It saw what they were doing. It saw the Krath suffering, and it wanted to help. It bypassed the internal security. It linked itself to the disruption array. It began to amplify the signal, injecting its own ancient hatred into the broadcast. "Commander," the tech officer shouted, "the array is overloading. The anomaly is pushing too much power through the conduits. If it keeps this up, the array will explode and take the lower decks with it." Marsh did not hesitate. "We cannot shut it down now. The Krath need to hear the rest of the message. Prepare the High Krath translation. We are going to talk to them directly." The disruption array was burning itself out. The ancient AI anomaly was forcing too much raw data through the human hardware. The lower decks of the bastard's bargain were filling with smoke. Damage control teams fought electrical fires in the dark, but the signal was out there. It was tearing through the Krath communication network like a wildfire. The massive Krath eastern flank, consisting of 11 elite divisions, had completely stopped moving. They were paralyzed. The unstoppable advance had finally broken. Now comes the psychological blow. Marsh stepped down from the command chair. She walked over to the communications terminal. She had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. She had studied the Krath. She had studied their tactics, their biology, and their language. "Open a clear channel on all Krath priority frequencies," she ordered. "No encryption, wide broadcast." The communications officer stared at her. "Sir, if we do that, they will be able to pinpoint our exact location." "I know," Marsh said calmly. "Do it." The officer flipped the switches. The channel was open. They were broadcasting to the entire Krath military machine, to the supply ships, to the frontline divisions, to the high command itself. Marsh took a deep breath. She spoke into the microphone. She did not speak English. She did not speak the common trade tongue of the conclave. She spoke in High Krath. It was the formal, complex register used only by Krath high commanders. It was a language of absolute authority. She told them exactly what she had done. She detailed the supply arteries that had been severed. She listed the biological hubs that had been corrupted. She recited their own mathematical projections back to them, updated with the new catastrophic variables she had introduced. She spoke with zero emotion. She mirrored their own cold geological patience. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. She was telling the enemy that their perfect certainty was a lie. "We have not harmed your people," she said in perfect High Krath. We have not destroyed your ships in open combat. We have simply made your machinery stop. We can make more of it stop, or we can stop doing this entirely. The choice belongs to you." She ended the transmission. The bridge was completely silent. Even the alarm seemed quieter. They had just told the most ruthless alien empire in the galaxy where they were, what they had done, and challenged them to make a choice. "Now, we wait," she said. "Power down the disruption array. Let the AI anomaly starve. Get the stealth drives back online." The engineers worked frantically. The fires on the lower decks were contained. The smoking disruption array was powered down. The ship went quiet again. They drifted in the dark, waiting for the Krath response. It did not take long. 10 minutes later, the galactic frequencies spiked. A single, heavily encrypted transmission cut through the static. It was directed specifically at the bastard's bargain. "Translate it," Marsh ordered. The computer worked on the encryption. It was a simple cipher. The Krath wanted them to read it. The text appeared on the main view screen. It was just 3 words. "We see you." The tactical officer grabbed his console. "Commander, the eastern flank is moving. Are they advancing?" Marsh asked. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sidearm. If they advanced, the mission had failed. "No," the officer said. His voice was full of disbelief. "They are pulling back. They are reversing their trajectory. The Krath are retreating." The word hung in the air. Retreating. The Krath never retreated. But they were doing it now. The logic of their machine had dictated that the advance was no longer mathematically viable. The human virus, the disruption, the psychological shock of the broadcast. It was too much. The entire front line, stretching across multiple star systems, began to systematically fall back. The 60-year war was stopping. It was not a dramatic collapse. It was orderly and precise. But the red tide on the galactic map was finally receding. "Set a course for home," Marsh said quietly. "Maximum stealth. Let us get out of here before they change their minds." The bastard's bargain turned its heavy nose away from Krath space. The engines flared, and they vanished into the absolute dark. They were leaving the ghost planet and the ruined supply lines behind. They had done the impossible. The journey back to Conclave space was long and silent. The crew of the bastard's bargain did not celebrate. They were too exhausted. They patched the hull, treated the burn victims from the lower decks, and drank terrible synthetic coffee. They had survived, but the adrenaline had left them hollow. 3 days later, they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They arrived at Harith's Point, the massive staging area for the Allied fleet. 4,000 warships from 11 different species were floating in perfect formation. They were waiting. When the bastard's bargain appeared on the passive sensors, the Allied fleet went crazy. Comms channels flooded with requests. The Conclave commanders could not believe what they were seeing on the strategic maps. The Krath had stopped. The Krath had pulled back. The impossible had happened. Marsh docked her battered ship with the Allied flagship. The massive heavy cruiser looked small and broken compared to the elegant alien vessels around it. But as she walked down the boarding ramp, the alien crews stood at attention. Nobody spoke. They just watched the humans with a new, terrifying respect. The formal conclave meeting happened 2 days later. The Krath had opened diplomatic channels. It was unprecedented. They wanted to discuss a permanent cessation of advance operations. They wanted a ceasefire. The war was effectively over. The alien ambassadors sat in the Great Hall. They looked at the human delegation. Ambassador Wren sat quietly, his hands folded. He did not look triumphant. He just looked tired. The Dorath ambassador, a tall being who had lost his entire homeworld to the Krath, stood up. He looked at Wren. He looked at Commander Marsh, who was standing quietly in the corner of the room. He had to ask the question that every species in the galaxy was thinking. He cleared his throat. The translation matrix broadcast his words to everyone in the room. This plan, this execution, it was flawless. But we must know, for the security of the conclave, for our own peace of mind, he paused. How many ships like the bastard's bargain does humanity have? How many siege engines capable of breaking an empire do you keep in the dark? The room went dead silent. Everyone looked at Ambassador Wren. They expected a lie. They expected a massive number to intimidate them. They expected a political maneuver. Wren looked at the Dorath ambassador. Then he looked at the holographic map in the center of the room, the map that was finally, after 60 years, turning green again. He leaned forward to the microphone. He spoke a single word. Enough. It was not a number. It was a promise. It was a threat. It was the absolute truth. Humanity did not need thousands of ships to win the war. They just needed the right ship, in the right place, at the exact right time. They had used patience as a weapon, and it had worked. Marsh left the hall before the meeting finished. She walked back to the docking bay. She looked out the large viewport at the bastard's bargain. The engineers were already welding new plates onto the hull. The ship looked ugly, mean, and perfectly beautiful. Her tactical officer walked up beside her. "So what happens now, Commander?" he asked. Marsh smiled faintly. "We go home. We fix the portside thrusters. We restock the coffee. And then we wait." "Wait for what?" She looked out into the deep black void of space. "For the next ghost," she said. "For the next anomaly. For the next time the galaxy decides it needs a bastard to do the dirty work." She turned and walked down the ramp, back into the metal heart of her ship. The war was over. But deep space was endless, and there was always something waiting in the dark.